Chapter 23 The Nameless King. Then spake Elisha unto the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, Arise and go thou and thine household and sojourn wheresoever thou canst sojourn, for the Lord hath called for a famine, and it shall also come upon the land 7 years. And the woman arose and did after the saying of the man of God, and she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And it came to pass at the 7 years' end that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines, and she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha has done. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life. And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, Restore all that was hers, and all the fruits of the field, since the day that she left the land, even until now. 2 Kings 8, 1-6. Elisha told the Shunammite woman, apparently now a widow, to leave Israel because of a forthcoming famine. There could have been other and political reasons for this counsel, but a judgment was clearly coming in the form of a famine of 7 years. We need not assume, as so many scholars do, that the number 7 is symbolic and not literal. The land was to have its Sabbath rests every 7th year, and Israel had not kept the law. Hence, a 7-year famine was a reminder of God's law and the reason for the judgment. Exodus 23, 10-11, Leviticus 25, 1-7, 20-22, etc. The woman obeyed Elisha and went to Philistia for the duration. This is paradoxical because normally Philistia was a drier area. At the end of the drought, the woman returned to Israel, only to find that others had occupied her house and were using her land. Because of the drought, grazing was poor and limited, and outsiders had taken over her land to get all possible benefits from that additional acreage. Unable to dispossess them by means of the local courts, she went to Samaria to appeal to the king. The gates of a city were in those days both a marketplace and a court. There the king sat to hear appeals. He had asked Gehazi, the former, and now leprous servant of Elisha, to give him a report on Elisha's miracles. Elisha was currently not available or in hiding. To ask about Elisha was in effect to ask for a miracle in a time of judgment. In the king's mind there was this question: what has Elisha done in the past, and what can he do now? Elisha, we must remember, was Elijah's chosen successor. It was Elijah who had called down a most fearful drought on Israel. Had Elisha invoked this one? How should Elisha be dealt with? Gehazi told the king of the restoration of life to the dead son of the woman of Shunem. At this moment the widow appeared before the king. Gehazi, as a leper, stood further out and was thus in a position to spot her, and he said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life. The king at once appointed an officer to take charge of the restoration of the widow's land to her, with full restitution. 2 things are immediately noticeable. First, the king is eager to help a widow who is a closer friend of Elisha. There is no investigation. He is sure that the widow is in the right. The widow's absence at Elisha's council points to at least Elisha's foreknowledge of the drought. The king has no desire to offend Elisha or the widow. In fact, he is eager to please them. Second, we are not given the king's name, although scholars have made it clear that there are 2 possible monarchs whose dates make tenable their part in this episode. Whichever of the 2 it was, the more important fact is that he is deliberately left nameless. Of this king, it can be said that he was a better man than Ahab, which is not saying much. More importantly, he was not as significant a ruler as Ahab. We readily remember the Roman emperors before and after Nero, however evil they were. Rome then still had a future, although by the end of the 1st century, Rome was moving into an economic decline from which she never recovered. It is difficult for us to remember, however, more than one at most of the last 4 or 5 emperors before Rome fell to the barbarians. They may have been better men than Nero and Caligula, for example, but they were irrelevant men. After Ahab, the kings of Israel were irrelevant men. They did not so appear in their day, and somewhat later Jeroboam II established Israel in what seemed to be her greatest glory. It was, all the same, a superficial and decadent power, and Scripture gives it only brief attention. Jeroboam II, 787 to 747 BC, the 14th king of Israel, added to the territories of the realm. He was popular. His reign was one marked by a superficial wealth, and art flourished. Within a few years after his death, Israel was conquered and destroyed. In Scripture, Jeroboam does not gain either the attention or the approval which was his in that day. 2 Kings 13:4-6, 14:23-28, Hosea 1:1 and 2, 4:12-14, 13:2 and 3, 5-7, Amos 1:3-5, 13, 2:1-3, 6:7, 7:9, 13:17. The fortifications for Samaria, which Jeroboam II built, were as much as 33 feet wide, and it took the Assyrians 3 years to seize the city. 2 Kings 17:5. For his time, for his people, and for the other nations of his day, Jeroboam II was seen as Israel's greatest monarch. But in Scripture, he receives attention on a scant level when compared to Ahab. The Bible depicts Jeroboam II as the end of the road for Israel. We hear of him and then of his miserable successors, only as harbingers of the last days of Israel and of the final phase of God's judgment. There is thus no mention of the specific king in these verses. He is an inadequate and irrelevant man. There are improvements in Israel, but no true reformation. Israel's future has become death, and the prophets minister to a remnant.